Imagine spending 7 billion euros on a brand new international airport and being told it was already too small before a single passenger had ever set foot inside it. Now imagine that same airport, finished, fully built, ready to fly, sitting completely empty for years. The lights were on. The escalators worked. The check-in desk stood waiting. And nobody came. This was the Berlin Brandenburg Airport. The gateway that was meant to announce a reunified German capital to the world. Instead, it became the most expensive monument to how a great engineering nation could humiliate itself. This is the troubling reality of an airport that was obsolete long before it ever opened. If you're new here, this channel investigates the engineering and the money behind Europe's biggest construction disasters. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. To understand the scale of this failure, you first have to understand the dream behind it. After reunification, Berlin was a single city once more, but it was still being served by 3 aging airports: Tegel, Schönefeld, and Tempelhof. None of them fit for a modern capital. The plan was bold and, on paper, completely sensible. Build one large, modern hub on the southern edge of the city, close the old airports for good, and give the new Germany a gateway worthy of a global power. This was never meant to be just an airport. It was meant to be a statement, proof that the reunified capital could match London, Paris, and Amsterdam and take its place among the great hubs of Europe. The country that had given the world a reputation for precision engineering would build the airport to prove it. Construction began in 2006. The grand opening was set for October of 2011. The budget was projected at around 2 billion euros, and the main terminal was designed to handle roughly 27 million passengers every single year. But there was a detail in how the project was run that would come to haunt it. Overseeing the entire effort was a supervisory board chaired not by aviation engineers or seasoned construction experts, but by politicians, the leaders of the regional governments that owned the airport. Remember that. It matters more than almost anything else in this story. Here was the promise Berlin made to itself and to the world. A single, world-class airport, opened by the autumn of 2011, built for around 2 billion euros, a clean, modern symbol of German efficiency and precision. Hold on to that promise. It is the anchor for everything that follows. Almost none of it would survive contact with reality. The first crack appeared in the most public way imaginable. The grand opening was scheduled for June 2012. Invitations had gone out. Chancellor Angela Merkel was expected to attend. Aircraft were prepared. Schedules were printed. A celebration was ready. And then, roughly 4 weeks before the ceremony, the entire thing was cancelled. The reason was simple and devastating. The fire safety inspectors would not approve the building. What followed was almost beyond belief. Not one delay, but 6 separate opening dates, each announced with confidence and then quietly abandoned, one after another. Every cancellation was a fresh public embarrassment for a nation that prided itself on getting these things right. Corruption scandals began to surface. Imtech, the company responsible for a major part of the airport's safety systems, collapsed into bankruptcy in 2015. And in 2017, the airport's intended anchor airline, Air Berlin, went bankrupt as well before the airport it was meant to fill had ever opened its doors. The German press gave the building a nickname that stuck for the better part of a decade: the Ghost Airport. So what actually went wrong? At the heart of the disaster was the fire protection and smoke extraction system, the network that, in an emergency, is supposed to pull deadly smoke out of a crowded terminal and keep the escape routes clear. At Berlin Brandenburg, this system was both badly designed and badly built. Instead of being channeled downward and out beneath the structure, the smoke was meant to be drawn upward by enormous fans on the roof in a configuration that the inspectors found simply unworkable. In a real fire, a system like that has to move colossal volumes of hot smoke fast enough to keep thousands of people alive long enough to escape. And this one could not be trusted to do it. The cabling was faulty. The fire doors did not function as they were supposed to. Thousands of individual defects piled up across the building. And here is the single fact that captures the entire scandal. The man who served as the chief planner of that smoke extraction system, Alfredo Di Mauro, was not a licensed engineer at all. He was a technical draftsman, something he himself later admitted publicly. The most safety-critical system in a building meant for tens of millions of people had been planned by someone without the qualifications the job demanded. If you're finding this worth your time, a subscribe helps more of these stories reach people who'd never hear them, and a like tells the algorithm it matters. As the failures mounted, so did the search for who was responsible, and in the years that followed, the courts handed down real consequences. A senior department head at the airport, identified in the German press only as Francis G., was convicted of accepting a bribe of 150,000 euros from Imtech and was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. The airport's former technical director, Jochen Grossmann, was convicted of corruption, receiving a suspended sentence and a fine of 200,000 euros. Imtech itself, the firm behind the failed smoke system, was found by a court to have bribed an airport official before the company collapsed into bankruptcy. And hanging over all of it was that supervisory board, the politicians who had steered a project of staggering technical complexity without the construction expertise that such a job truly required. But here is the twist that makes Berlin Brandenburg so much stranger than an ordinary delay. While the building sat unfinished and unopened, the world kept moving, and the airport began to fall out of date before it had ever served a single passenger. In 2014, the airport's own chief executive, Hartmut Mayborn, admitted in a progress report that the terminal was already too small, warning of bottlenecks at check-in, at security, and at baggage reclaim. In 2017, the people of Berlin voted in a referendum to keep the old Tegel airport open, precisely because they feared the shiny new one would not be big enough. According to industry reporting, the building had sat finished and idle for so long that its technology had to be updated during the endless rework. And then came the final, almost unbelievable irony. When Berlin Brandenburg at last opened its doors on the 31st of October, 2020, it did not open to the overcrowding that everyone had feared. It opened nearly empty. The COVID-19 pandemic had collapsed global air travel, and on its first day, the airport that had been declared too small handled around 11,000 passengers, a tiny fraction of the millions it had been built to serve. After all those years, it had somehow managed to be obsolete in design and deserted in practice at the very same moment. So what did all of this cost? The construction bill alone came to around 6 billion euros. Once financing and interest were added in, the total climbed to roughly 7 billion euros. Against an original projection of around 2 billion euros, the final price had more than tripled, ending up more than 4 billion euros above the estimate made when the airport was first supposed to open. And it arrived 9 years late, after 6 abandoned opening dates. Today, the airport does work. It is one of the busiest in Germany. A second terminal opened in March of 2022, itself delayed by the pandemic, and the combined facilities can now handle more than 40 million passengers a year, with plans to expand toward 58 million by the middle of the 2030s. The ghost airport is, at long last, a functioning one. But the reputation it earned over those lost years, as a monument to how badly even German engineering could go wrong, has proven far harder to rebuild than the terminal itself. Picture it one more time, a finished airport, gleaming and complete, standing empty in the dark for years, while the world it was built for slipped further and further out of reach. Berlin Brandenburg is the distance between the rendering and the rebar, between a capital's dream of announcing itself to the world and 7 billion euros spent on a building that was outdated before it opened and empty when it finally did. If the gap between ambition and accountability is worth understanding, subscribe. There are more of these stories, and they do not get any simpler.